DRC have arrived in the country. I am on Lambana for SFM News headlines at 1:30.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
We will never have a version of Ntirni that we don't love, I think. There's a brand new remix as well that's been circulating for the better part of last year. Black Coffee seems to have exclusivity on that one. And it's done by, I forget now, the young gentleman who is a house dance music producer. And Black Coffee was really just introducing the remix throughout his entire European summer schedule last year. Beautiful, beautiful rendition of Ntirni. That was Omu Sangare coming through with Ntirni. That is how we kick off for the show this afternoon. It has just gone 10 past 1 o'clock. I hope you are having a fabulous day. It feels like a bit of a mixed temperature afternoon. I'm not too sure from your perspective because it's cloudy outside in Johannesburg, but it's cold. I mean, it's hot. It's very, very hot. We feel hot, but it's cloudy outside. So it seems like a bit of a mixed day today. Speaking of a mixed day and a mixed bag, we've got a mixed bag of conversations. Today is World Radio Day. And of course, we are going to, observe the occasion. In fact, we're going to be touching base with a young broadcaster later on in the show from VOW, Voice of Wits. So we're going to be in conversation with them a little bit later. That's for World Radio Day. And this is an international day that's celebrated on the 13th of February every year. And it's it was designated by UNESCO on, in November back in 2011 during its 36th conference. And it's just to observe really the power and the impact of the medium of radio. Still remains one of the most important mediums of communications and information sharing. And of course, we, those who practice in radio and have practiced in radio, old and new, take the day also just to reflect back on our respective careers and the journeys that we have traveled, and some of the lessons and the principles that have come from working and being a part of this very exciting communication medium. I was thinking back today as I was looking at the archives, and I was like, could it be that I'm already on year 20? My goodness, having begun the journey in 2005. In 2005 at YFM, and spent quite a number of years there doing some really, really incredible work. And then, like most radio people, then you phase out of, either youth radio, commercial youth radio. You get too old, got too old for commercial youth radio at some point. Because once you're married, you can't be broadcasting on youth radio anymore. So I spent wonderful years at YFM, and I happened to share that experience with some radio giants, the likes of DJ Fresh, Rude Boy Paul, Unati, Bad Boy T, and the list goes on and on of, really impactful radio personalities. And then moved on and had a short stint at what was then called Highveld, which has since become 947. Spent a little bit of time there. And then went behind the scenes of radio, more from a contenting perspective, for a year as I got into my studies. And then from there, came back again into front of mic, and commercial radio came calling, and had an interesting time at the primarily Afrikaans medium Jacaranda FM, which is an incredible radio station, and ultimately finding myself at the adult contemporary home of the Afropolitan, which was Kaya, and then finding myself obviously here at SAFM. So it's been an interesting ride. We've moved all the way from youth radio to circular music radio, to a whole different language medium, and then coming full circle on the country's biggest talk radio station, and having engaging conversations with you every single day. And hopefully we get to grow together. So this is World Radio Day, and I hope you still enjoy and engage with this very important medium of communication. We've got so much on the show today. Like I said, it's a mixed bag of tricks. We're going to be touching base with the folks from Fundi, and we're going to have a conversation around South Africa's student accommodation crises. And there's an urgent need for safety, security, and of course solutions to the student accommodation issues that are plaguing students countrywide, really. And it seems to be an ongoing conversation every single year. Stages, pages, screens, and more is coming up as well. And like I said, because it's World Radio Day, the theme this year is around radio and climate change. And so we're going to have that conversation with an environmental activist, just looking at how this medium plugs into the broader conversation. On the other side of 2, that's when we touch base with those young presenters from the Voice of Wits. It's 1:15. We're going to take a quick pause, and then we're going to come back on the other side.
Fizzy drinks and fruit juices can make our children sick. Sugar is dumped into their bodies with every sip, which could lead to obesity, heart disease, and diabetes as they age. We must protect them from drinks high in sugar. Demand a stricter health promotion levy now. Sign the petition on heala.org. That's HEALA.org.
Masandawana want to display their elite status with a graduation letter to the last 8. However, lower division team, Mpeni Home Defenders, are seeking to make history and join the league of giant killers. This is the Nedbank Cup Ross 16. Mamelodi Sundowns versus Mpeni Home Defenders on Sunday, 16 February at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC 1 and at 3 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Are we ready for a real conversation? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. You're listening to Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Alrighty, let's get into the conversation of the day as we kick off with this one, looking at South Africa's student accommodation crises. And this is a very pressing conversation because we know that universities across the country every single year find themselves at the precipice of this situation where students are left almost homeless and destitute, for a whole host of reasons. There seems to be not enough student accommodation, not enough adequate student accommodation, and of course crises around delayed funding, so students cannot pay for their accommodation on time, and it just keeps being an ongoing issue, and we want to know why is that so? And we're catching up with Benedict Johnson, who's my apologies, not Benedict this afternoon, actually Ayanda Ngobo, who's the corporate sales manager at Fundi. How are you doing this afternoon, Ayanda?
I'm doing well, Bridget. How are you? And congratulations on the journey that you've just given us with your career. Listen, I was just listening there and thinking, oh my word. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ayanda. Let's get into it, right? Because for some reason, it's a looped conversation. Mm-hmm. And it's been going on now for the better part of the decade. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be no resolution to mm-hmm. the student accommodation crisis in the country.
Sure. Okay, I'm gonna try and advocate for some people here. Okay. Yeah. Looking from the outside in, you might really think, come on, this is an issue year in, year out. Can you not solve it before it actually happens? Which is not actually as simple as you might look at it, because you're finding that universities are faced with a shortage of beds, whether it's on campus and off campus. Mm. And then you find that with off-campus accommodation, it needs to be accredited. And we know this year that NAFOS has taken a bit of a delay in actually accrediting off-campus accommodation, meaning that even the university cannot trust that the bed spaces have been checked out, inspected, and verified. Mm. And so there's a delay in that process. They can't just send their students out. Then you find that there's unaccredited accommodation as well, which is accommodation that no one really has even gone and checked if there's a bed there. Mm. Someone is maybe claiming that there's a bed there. So there's a lot of processes that really the universities, the accommodation providers, the students, and the private sector really need to look into and really try and work on so that we don't face this issue going forward. But I just wanted to advocate that it's not as simple as it sounds. Yeah. As much as it's a reoccurring issue, but it's not really that simple to get it right.
Yeah. I mean, and having an appreciation for what you just say, right? What you just said about sort of the delay in systems, the bureaucracy perhaps around some of the more administrative issues. But some folks might argue that, yes, but we we know it's a guarantee that we're going to get students into the system annually, and of course the existing students also. So we know the cycle, the scholastic cycle. Given all of that administrative backlog and all of the things that persist, why does there not seem to be a sort of a more focused and more urgent need to at least try and alleviate some of the pressure, especially when it comes from, for instance, from a funding accreditation perspective?
You know what? I know that there has been delays as well in terms of funding, just to give the students funding for them to go and get suitable accommodation. And you're quite right. And I stand with you to say, come on, I'm sure we can deploy more resources to make sure that this is corrected. And I've seen across the country there's protests, there's delayed payments, there's shortages of beds. And I really do hope that we are now in the spotlight, and we will be able to deploy the right resources and do it fast as well, because as we speak, there are students that are sleeping outside, or they have to make other means, or they have to wait for allocation, or, and there's just a backlog upon backlog. And all I can say to you is that I'm sure there are third parties that are available to plug in. I'm sure there are other resources that are able to plug in and really assist the university and NSFAS and the students to actually get accommodation, and suitable accommodation at that. But it's crisis, and I do agree with you.
What does it tell us, the fact that this particular situation is not unique to a specific institution or province, but really, it's a widespread norm?
It is. It is. Listen, we know in the news as well that NSFAS took an undertaking to take over accreditation. And with that being said, there are institutions that were given a time to motivate why they should stick to their own process, correct? They actually submitted those. NSFAS had a look and said, okay, we are actually taking you out of the system. You can continue with your processes. But they still wanted to take over accommodation in the TVET colleges and with some institutions. Because of that undertaking and the lack of resources thereof, there was a delay. And I'm hoping that the delay is actually being fixed as we speak, because I went to a university just the other day. I got back yesterday, and we had to quickly take over and ensure that beds are actually allocated correctly. So there is a backlog, but we are working with universities, partnering with universities where we possibly can, to ensure that we streamline this process, and not only that, but actually put some speed in it so that no child is left destitute as they already are at this moment.
Yeah, I would love to hear your views, obviously, as a parent or a guardian or perhaps a student. If you're listening to our conversation with Ayanda, feel free to send us a voice note on WhatsApp, or you can send us a message on 061-410-4107 or 086 0002032, and let us know your thoughts around the student accommodation crisis in South Africa. Perhaps you have a suggestion as to how things could be better streamlined and better facilitated for students based on your experience with trying to get a student accommodation for yourself or perhaps for your children. And there's a lot of people, Ayanda, that tend to suggest that the system was not broken before. They tend to suggest that it used to be better, and now it's just gotten systematically worse, and especially with NSFAS trying to centralize everything. It seems as though everybody, well, at least a majority of voices out there, really are against them centralizing everything.
All right, let me try and be politically correct with this one. I honestly believe that the vision to centralize is not ideally a bad one, but it's just the resources to back up. So there's a huge undertaking with no resources to back it up. So if you hear them out and you listen to why they want to centralize, and you can understand that there's a lot of monies that are involved in this process, and you understand the idea of them, keeping it within that organization. But then you look at the resources and actually even the process in which they started this, then we can argue that maybe the issue is not in the vision, the issue is in the execution. Okay. So was it broken? Maybe necessarily not. But is there a vision to centralize and maybe things will be better once it's actually gotten right? Maybe then that's the case. I do believe that it was not broken, know, but the centralization makes sense when you actually get closer to it and understand where it is coming from. And the reason why is that maybe people are not privy to understand where the centralization comes from. But we look at why was, let me go back to your point as to it was not broken, why fix something that was not broken. I guess they have their own reasons, but we exist because that problem exists, if that makes any sense. And we plug in and we create systems that are plug and play with various institutions. Let me take Fundi, for example.
Yeah.
We've built a tripartite seamless accommodation platform. And what this accommodation does is that it honestly takes into the safety of the students. It takes into sight that the institution in itself needs to have line of sight, but it also protects the business of the accommodation provider. Because these unique parties are actually unique in where the hurting points are, we've built a system that migrates them. So with the student side, it's a property 24 engine with the tagline to say, why travel when you can search? Because even the traveling, students are susceptible to unsafe accommodations, or they are susceptible to fraud. So they can just take online and find accommodation. On the accommodation side, or the landlord side, we have actually inspected those accommodation providers. They are been accredited by the various institutions. So you will not find a fly-by-night accommodation on the property, because we actually go through the process of meeting with the accommodation providers. We take on their pictures. We make sure that they are who they say they are. And then on the institution side, we give you line of sight. We give you an ability to allocate and an ability for you to see what's been happening and to track student movement. So there are third parties that have really looked at the situation and decided, okay, let's use our IT capabilities to actually plug into this issue and make sure that institutions get the help that they need, because you can imagine the volumes year in and year out. And so this system actually helps with that.
Okay. And I mean, vetting of both, accommodation as well as landlord is a very important part of this conversation, right? Because safety is a major concern. And we've noted the reports of kidnappings and attempted human trafficking that was targeting students. We saw, the many headline stories that have come out in the last year or two. And so this is an important part to ensure that a student and the student communities are safe in the places that accommodate them.
Bridget, you must understand that accredited accommodation has been built according to the norms and standards from DHET. Meaning that they're not cheap accommodation. You can't pay 500 rand for that bed. But because students are facing various issues even back at home, where they would want to actually save on those expenses, we can't control where the student goes. We can advise them to say, please go for accredited landlords or accredited accommodation providers. But sometimes students want to save that money, maybe take it back home or use it for something else, and they actually go and choose a 500 rand bed that no one has actually vetoed. No one actually knows where they stay. If anything happens, no one can actually even account for where they are. So another issue maybe is, let's not remove the student out of this crisis. We urge students to use the stipend given unto them, which is enough for them to get suitable accommodation, and go to accredited accommodation providers where they can be accounted for, and where we know that all the amenities that they need for success has been built in and are readily available for them.
The other thing I also want to find out, Ayanda, and I know we have to get into the headline news in a minute, and then we'll come back and continue our conversation on the other side. Because the other thing I want to find out as well, where we are as SABC, for instance, we are surrounded. UJ, Wits, everybody is around us. And there's a lot of student accommodation in this vicinity. And oftentimes when one drives down, I look at some of these, realtor advertisements for student accommodation for 9.5 thousand rand, and I go, where is a student getting 9.5 thousand rand for one bedroom? How are we regulating some of these buildings and these landlords?
So there is a cap, Bridget. There is a cap that NSFAS has given, which I can assure you, having worked with accommodation providers across the country, that it will get you a suitable bed. That it will get you a proper bed with a study desk and everything that you need. And then there are, if I can say, more lavish accommodations, where the parents can either top up that which has already been provided, or they can actually afford to send their students there where the amenities are bigger. We're talking pool, we're talking gym, we're talking various laundry services. And so if the appetite, and sometimes it might be there and sometimes it might not be there, but I still say if the market is there, we might as well build these, if I can say, lavish accommodation providers. But yes, can a normal student afford that? The answer is absolutely not. We probably cap at 4,000, 4,200. But there are other parents that say, listen, I want my child to have everything. I will top up. I will make the means possible. But is it exorbitant for a student market? Yes, it is. But there are students that are able to actually afford it in this country.
All right, we'll come back on the other side of this. 061-410-4107 is our WhatsApp line. If you'd like to weigh in on our conversation, we're talking student accommodation in the country, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Ondela standing by.
Thank you, Bridget. In the news headlines, members of Parliament's Employment and Labour Committee have cautioned against the use of venues for Parliament businesses that could put the institution in bad light. Due to the fire that broke out at Parliament in 2022, space for committee meetings have been impacted. SANDF Admiral Prince Shabalala has confirmed that the mortal remains of the soldiers who were killed in the eastern DRC have arrived in the country, and researchers say China's construction of coal-fired power plants surged last year to its highest level in almost a decade. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
So approximately 500,000 students in the country are without a bed. That is our shortfall that we are facing. And it's making it impossible for students and institutions to house all students who require accommodation. And so this is where the private service providers generally step in. But of course, as you've just heard from our conversation with Ayanda, there are a lot of sort of requirements also, and there's a lot more to this issue than meets the eye. Let's talk about, you did say, for instance, that Fundi, you guys plug in from the perspective of vetting accommodation and vetting landlords. But does this information get to students? Because it seems like there are many students that still fall victim to one or the other accommodation scam.
Oh, Bridget, you'd actually be surprised that sometimes, our key stakeholders are universities. So, for example, we'll speak with the CFO, we'll cite the issues that are at hand, we'll look at the demographic of the university, and we'll provide a solution. It's actually, with some of the universities, the students have said, we actually don't want it. We don't want it. We don't want transparency. We don't want to. They still want the freedom to stay at, as I said, at a back room somewhere. And they're saying, it's my decision, it's my money, I'm able to do whatever I want to do with it. So it's not as easy as people think, and not everyone is geared or excited about the solution as we are.
Yeah. And that's a travesty, really, because, as you say, safety, convenience, proximity, all these things should be things that students, but I guess if, you're given your NSFAS monthly stipend, I don't even know how much is the NSFAS monthly stipend, you have, as a student, you might be thinking there's better things to do with that money. So, accommodation might not be the thing. But for those who maybe are trying to get into the right spaces, you'll get kids that say, like we said, kids come from adverse situations at home. They're supporting themselves with these NSFAS stipends, but also supporting family. And so they want to make that money stretch a little bit, but without compromising their safety, without compromising comfortability, and all the things that matter. For them, what should be some of the red flags that they must look out for?
So I really understand the situation because I come from that background myself. And it's one of my key passions, if I can put it in that way. And what students can do to protect themselves, since we can't make those decisions for them, is use verified listing companies, or listing websites rather, to search for accommodation. Okay, I know there's Fundi, which I always put first, but there's also Dix Connect, there's T-Res Link, there is Fundi Connect where you can look for accommodation. So go on verified listings, look for accommodation, and there is a friend of mine who opened, I think it's called backroom.com if I'm not mistaken, and he's we went to all those accommodations and looked at the facilities. They're not up to standard, but you will not get human traffic, for example.
Yeah.
So they are, and parents need to be aware. Please go and look and search and go and view accommodation. Don't just trust a picture on WhatsApp. Don't just trust what the landlord says. Don't just easily send in your banking details or send money to a student just because you are running out of time to get secure accommodation. If it means just one day, you need to wait, travel to that accommodation, go and look at it. Look at how far it is from the university, because the PHED says you need to build, sorry, what is the word? Starting away from me now. There's a 14-kilometer radius from the university. And if you're outside of that radius, you must provide a shuttle service. But because we can't put those things in place, you need to at least travel there and see how far are you from school. Are you not next to a brothel? Are you not a bottle store? What are the other factors that can actually harm your safety? If you finish lectures at 8 o'clock, when maybe you are studying, can you actually travel at night by yourself to your accommodation? So those are things that students really, really need to take into account, because the unfortunate part is that if anything should happen, all we are going to say is that we are sorry. But there's nothing else that we can do to ensure that that did not could not have happened to you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Let's go to WhatsApp. 0614104107 is our WhatsApp line.
Good afternoon, Bridget. Hope you're well. I think this whole student accommodation thing is a big rip-off. NSFAS shouldn't be paying for student accommodation. The only accommodation that should be available is that if there are places like Growth Point or whatever it is where they've built blocks for student accommodation, or the reses at the varsities and the technicons. Those are the only ones that should be actually paid for via NSFAS. If a student wants to go rent a room in a house for 6,000 Rand and they will top it up, that's not on. Because all that money that is wasted, you don't actually know that student is actually living there or whatever they're doing there, whatever it is. Reses have rules and regulations. You're paying money for rental and for res for studying. Nothing else. That's what the students should be doing there. Mark from Cape Town.
Good afternoon. Can you please help me with this one? Some students go on the portal to choose the residences, private residences that they want to go to. And when they go to a particular university and say, okay, I've now registered, I've been accepted at this accommodation, can I please have confirmation that I'm a student at your university? The university says, no, go and cancel that. We're going to put you in our own residence. Why is that happening? Because students obviously have a choice. They can decide if they want to stay at the university residence or at an accredited university residence.
Student accommodation is real a painful thing, especially this thing happens year in, year out, as you've just mentioned earlier on. And thank you very much for coming to the studio to enlighten the masses about exactly what is happening. However, I would like to find out, have you, or in your processes, do you encourage students to also consider accommodation in the townships? I know that maybe they may not be that ideal because they are not accommodative in so far as their studies are concerned. However, we know that not everyone is on NSFAS, but there are those students who are paid for by parents or sometimes by themselves because they do piece jobs. But would you also think about organizing that there is at least transport going to those townships so that you meet them halfway insofar as cost? This is Bike in Cape Town.
All right. I mean, you can go for it in whichever order, Ayanda, if you can remember what is what.
I can, let me try and remember. So I think the first, I appreciate your views. The first view, I think for me, is being made from a point of privilege.
Yes.
Because the demographic really are not the same.
Mark, with the Growth Point buildings, the controlled buildings, the vetted buildings, the big developments for students.
Very, very expensive as well, so we need to take into account that there are 26 universities across the country. There are 3 tiers. There's urban, there's semi-urban, and there's rural areas. And when you look at actually building in rural areas, and this is where maybe we need to have a broader discussion, is that it's actually even more expensive to build in rural areas than it is to build in urban areas. So sometimes funding is not available for those, and the shortage stays the same because no one is able to take the financial risk to go and build in those areas. But number two, I think the lady that spoke second is actually an accommodation provider. You need to understand that there's a process that every university has, and their process is we are going to locate on campus first. That's priority. We want you in our residences because they have residences too. So they're going to allocate first in on campus, second in off campus, and once that is full, then students will be redirected elsewhere. So first on campus will always take priority. There's even a clause that says, please don't take on a student that has been accepted in on campus accommodation.
Oh,
and
right.
That's just how it is. That's how they protect their own students. And I don't know if I'm going to remember the third one.
The gentleman really was just suggesting, around accommodation in the townships, that can students be encouraged to take up accommodation in the townships, of course, granted if it ticks all the boxes by way of logistics and transport, the ease of getting to and from.
Listen, I also attend a lot of student-built accommodation, and this helps us just to understand from a developer's point of view, what are the issues there and why can't they build according to the standards. And I said it is actually very, very expensive. And the banks, and that's a different discussion for another day. So I would encourage that students go and view alternative accommodations. And if it's a place that is neat, I've got a lot of friends that run these businesses in various places in Johannesburg and other places as well, and they provide suitable accommodation for the students. I would say please go and view, make sure that you're safe, look around, look at the transport system as well, look at your safety. Is there security or are there cameras or whatever the case is, whatever the landlord can provide to ensure that the student is safe. And another thing, just because you're in a township does not mean you don't have suitable accommodation. We need to just deal with that right away. There are beautiful accommodations in the townships. They are safe, it's got security, and people have gone out of their way to ensure that they've got amenities that students will actually find to benefit them. So it doesn't mean that just because in the township it's not suitable, but it does not also mean that all of them will be suitable. Just in the same case as accredited doesn't mean that it's the best. I've got students that would go to an accredited accommodation. In a week they would say, oh, I have to move out of here because of X, Y, and Z. So do you understand that when people go and inspect, sometimes they know that they'll be inspected and they will put their best foot forward, and then when the students go and stay there, what is promised and what is delivered are worlds apart. So students will constantly be a journey, and we encourage students to constantly give feedback either to the institution or to the landlord so that they can improve the following year or even be blacklisted for the following year if the standards are not met. We need to be strict in that department. So those are my views.
Ayanda, as we wrap it up, I have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but just a reminder for Fundi's platform, for those listening who want to go through and just find out who's accredited and who's not on Fundi Connect. Where do they go?
All right, you can go to www.fundi.co.za, or you can actually pop me an email at Ayanda, N for November, at fundi.co.za, either if you're a university or a landlord, and we can take it from there. Thank you so much for your time, Bridget. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That was Ayanda Ngobo, Corporate Sales Manager at Fundi, and you heard www.fundi.co.za is where you can go for Fundi Connect, and they've got a list of all the accredited establishments, accommodation establishments and landlords for your kids. Alternatively, you can pop her an email, ayanda@fundi.co.za, especially if you are a landlord, perhaps you're looking to be accredited, or you are a provider of services in some capacity and you're looking to be accredited and vetted. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back on the other side of this, and we're going to get into stages, pages, screens, and more.
Top Sport with Michael Abramson.
I said you take a sport that we feature sometimes on the show, spell it back to front, and you'll get a word that means to beat. How many of you got it right? Well, let's find out. First, let's go to the voice notes.
The word golf back to front would be spelled backwards, would be flog, and flog means to beat or to whoop.
The sport you're looking for is golf, and the name is flog.
The answer that you're looking for is a boxer. It's B for boxer.
A nice, easy sport. We cover it on a Thursday night in our tea time slot, predominantly on the show. And golf spelled backwards is flog, and to flog, as in to flog a dead horse, means to beat or to whip.
Top Sport on SAFM. Stages, pages, screens, and more with Bridget Masinga.
Jay Savage is joining us now, poet and of course, narrator and part of this interesting production. We are looking at a story that's born out of love and an unquenchable yearning for answers. Requiem for the Impossible launches with a limited run for 4 performances at the Homecoming Center in District 6. And this is, if I understand correctly, Jay, this is based on some real-life events that pertained to your brother, Anthony Murray. How are you doing this afternoon?
Very good, Bridget. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Yes.
Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Bridget, the story was around a boat that my brother, who was a skipper of 30 years standing, was delivering. He was delivering a boat with a crew of 3 to Phuket, and 10 years ago, this month, 10 years ago, at the end of January, contact was lost with the boat. We understood that the boat hit a cyclone, and no one ever returned. So this is now basically the 10th anniversary and memorial of that event.
Wowza. And this event has now been, and obviously I presume sort of the event, but more the emotional unpacking that came with the circumstance is now being penned into this production, the Requiem for the Impossible. Tell us about, why it was so important for yourself as well as your co-collaborators just to mark this moment in time and to ensure that this story lived on in the pages of history.
Well, it's been the project's been in development for more than a year, nearly 2 years. We have been fortunate to have the Effect Lab, which is a creative studio in Amsterdam, to be our partners in it. And although the story launches from, our specific experience, it relates and it taps into a wider theme of ambiguous loss, which has become recognized as a condition that people who lose loved ones have no ending, have no end to the story. That you don't know exactly what happened. You don't have you don't have the formal rituals of a funeral and burial or whatever's entailed. And loss in this way is an increasingly it's something that's increasingly evident in the world with refugees who get lost in the ocean doing ocean crossings, particularly in the Mediterranean. Someone who might be a soldier that doesn't come back from combat, people who disappear, the bereaved, the people left behind are unable ever to truly, put an end, to close that chapter. So it's a particular kind of loss that the project covers, but it's also really a story of sailors, people who live and thrive on the ocean, and who have a story that is very particular, and it's not a there's a certain amount of sadness because we know what the whole project is covering, but Anthony at the time was going to work on a book with my wife, who's a writer, and he had been recording his sort of reminiscences, his experiences. He'd been doing this for many, many years. He crossed the world. He'd been around the globe 7 or 8 times in total, through many, many trips, and he was keeping a record, and he was recording all of his adventures and exploits. And fortunately, Diane, my wife, had hours of his of him talking. So, in fact, when you say the narrator, the narrative of it was sort of put together, out of my experience, but the voice you hear in the show is his mostly.
Is your brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
An interesting concept, and because obviously your brother went missing, from what I understand, skipper Anthony Murray, with first mate Reginald Robertson and young deckhand Gerard Payne, and that was back in 2014, as you've just said, when they were to deliver that yacht in Phuket, Thailand.
Yes.
And so part of this production, is like you've mentioned, those recordings, first-hand recordings of your brother's adventures, his thoughts, his feelings, his reflections, and also, I guess, the reflections of yourself, your family, and those who were affected by the events that ultimately happened. What an incredible production to bring out this story, and a wonderful way to honor your brother as well. But by way of performances, because this is a limited run, right?
Yes.
What are those details?
Well, as I say, it was developed with the Fact Lab. We've had one or two. We had 2 test performances some months ago in Amsterdam. The show is really difficult to categorize because it is musical. There's the primary experience is musical, but it's done with a digital component, which means that the audience has access to an app that will do different things at different times through the production. So some of the words might come up. The lights on the phones flash.
So it's quite interactive.
It's quite interactive, and it's very immersive. It's very much everyone is part of it. The audience hopefully will feel that they are, they're very much in the experience.
Yeah. Jay, thank you so much for just bringing the story to light, the story of your brother. That was Jay Savage. He's a poet, and of course he's part of this production, the Requiem for the Impossible. It's launching with a very limited run, 4 performances only at the Homecoming Centre in District 6, and you can go to webtickets.co.za if you want to book yourself a seat. It's just gone 10 to. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to catch up quickly with Richard Worthington, and we're going to talk the theme for World Radio Day this year, which is radio and climate change.
It was all good just a week ago. Life was smooth. I was paying almost nothing for electricity tokens. All that changed when I was given a big fine for buying illegal electricity tokens from illegal vendors and my neighbor for tampering with his meter. Now, I might go to jail when all I had to do was register for free basic electricity at my local municipality since I'm unemployed. Ungathatha ama chance. Buy electricity legally. Report illegal electricity token sales in your area and meter tampering to Eskom on 0800 11 27 22.
So you think you're reheating leftovers and you thought it would be quick, right? But somehow they're still cold. So back in they go, and of course they're still cold. By the 3rd time, you just decide, well, let me just eat them anyway. But you know what takes faster than reheating leftovers? Well, getting your car covered online with Santam. It only takes 2 minutes to switch, and all you have to do is visit santam.co.za. That's Santam. This is freedom.
You're listening to Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Okay, let me get straight into it. Richard Worthington joins me now, freelance writer and activist and friend of the Climate Justice Coalition. And we're talking World Radio Day 2025. And we know the day is celebrated annually on the 13th of February. It honors the power of radio as a trusted medium for information, education, and connectivity. Good afternoon to you, Richard. How are you?
Good afternoon, Bridget. I'm fine, thank you.
Awesome. Let's touch on the impacts of climate change firstly in Southern Africa. And how does South Africa's geographic position and climate climate impacts compared to other countries in Southern Africa?
Well, I'd like to have an hour to tell you that, but given that we don't, now, South Africa, as part of Southern Africa, is one of the areas that is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So we have big challenges to adapt to the heating planet that we are creating and continue to create, particularly in terms of food security. In 2023, we saw what Cyclone Freddy did to the area, and then last year, with the failure of the summer rains, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi drying out and having less than, maybe 50% of crop yield. So we're vulnerable, and we're also a big polluter because we have a very carbon-intensive, energy-intensive economy, which means that, we're amongst the top 15 polluters, probably at number 13 at the moment. If our economy had been proceeding as we had anticipated, it would have been a lot higher, because we haven't done what we should be doing with renewable energy. In fact, even compared to what was in the 2019 plan, our electricity plan, which is still the applicable plan at the moment, ILP 2019, we're more than 5,000 megawatts of generation capacity behind what government then said it wanted to put in place. So we've got a lot of catching up to do in decarbonising our economy and taking advantage of clean energy industries.
Yeah.
But a lot of opportunity.
And speaking of that opportunity, perhaps an exploration on, what are our key challenges and what are some of the opportunities that are laying there, especially in scaling up renewable energy?
Ooh, another hour. Globally, things are getting increasingly messy and competitive rather than cooperative. So one of the biggest challenges is trying to play a meaningful role globally, since we're hosting the G20 this year, in countering the ludicrous behavior of the orange thing on the other side of the Atlantic. Keeping a multilateral process going and actually getting it to do much more than it has is one challenge. Another is addressing our national treasury's austerity approach to budgeting, which means that they're not making the funds available to build up a clean energy system, which all of our people need more than, there are 12 million households that are supposed to be receiving free basic electricity. The money's coming from Treasury for a very small amount, but of that, only 20% is getting to people in terms of the services they should be getting. Most of that is disappearing into other municipal expenses. So our big challenge is to eliminate energy poverty, both in South Africa and in the region, and to do that in a way that builds on the potential of long-term investments in our future rather than trying to make short-term profits out of continuing with fossil fuels.
Let's talk about, Richard, around perhaps the significance of the role that South Africa plays in the region in driving climate change solutions.
Well, yes. So our government is a bit divided on this, frankly. So parts of our government are doing really great work. Cooperating on regional basis is not what it needs to be, but there are efforts in that regard. And so parts of our government are very aware of the problems, challenges, and the need to direct resources this way, but other parts, like Minister Mantashe, are hell-bent on doing the same sort of thing that President Trump seems keen on, trying to maximize financial returns in the short term from deepening our dependence on the highly concentrated fossil fuel energy, which, our society is currently dependent on that. So it's not a trivial matter to try and get off it in 20 years. But it's doable if we decide that's what we want to do. But those people who want to keep concentrating power and wealth in the hands of the few, and Trump is emblematic of that. Him and a bunch of oligarchs, not just in America. I mean, it's the oligarchs in London and Moscow as well. But that is kind of the scale of the challenge we're in, is making sure that we stop concentrating power and wealth in the hands of the minority and find a way of cooperating in the interests of all of humanity.
Absolutely. You're right. We needed more time, but maybe I'll sneak in one little question. By way of just incorporating national policies, perhaps, how can Southern African governments ensure that climate change is effectively incorporated, and particularly to support vulnerable communities who are most impacted by climate change? I mean, we see annually what happens in Mozambique, for instance, with the cyclones.
Indeed. So decentralized energy systems are more resilient, not just to climate change, but also to the vagaries of the financial sector. So distributed and using renewable energy, which is freely available all over the place. The equipment for harvesting it is not free, but we have adequate solar throughout the region, far better than most of the rest of the world. We have loads of wind power, and these things, if we do them at scale, then we can also develop renewable energy industries, manufacturing the components, etc., and put more people to work. So if we want to reverse the concentration of wealth and power, we need to decentralize our energy system, particularly focusing on the distribution of electricity, because who can hear about disaster management opportunities in the face of a cyclone if they don't even have electricity?
Very true.
Solar home systems, mini grids, and wind with mini grids where the resource is good, and storage. Because you can't just rely on sun and wind, which does vary, unless you have a big grid to support it. So the big grid is also important to support it. But, we really need people having electricity on the ground so that they can get communications about the challenges that come with changing our planetary system.
Richard, I appreciate the short time with you and for packing in so much information in it. That was Richard Worthington. He's a freelance writer and activist. It's gone 2 o'clock. Ondela is patiently standing by with the top of the hour news. And remember that essential cover from OUTsurance pays out claims in cash, allowing you to choose your own panel beater. Simply SMS CAR to 43187 now.
Thank you, Bridget. Top stories of this hour. Venues for Parliament, a concern for the Labour Committee, and China's construction of coal-fired power plants reaches highest in a decade. For SAFM News, I am Ondelambana, and a very good day. Members of Parliament's Employment and Labour Committee have cautioned against the use of venues of Parliament business that could put the institution in a bad light. Due to the fire that broke out at Parliament in 2022, space for committee meetings have been impacted. As a result, in order to have physical meetings, committees are held at various conference and meeting venues across the city of Cape Town. Yesterday, the Committee of Employment and Labour had a meeting in the offices of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, but the meeting was disrupted due to a fire drill. The member of the committee, Desiree van der Walt, says careful consideration should be given to where committee meetings are held.
I have to raise my concern of using the NSFAS offices. It's not their building. I think we mustn't be hypocrites. The Minister of Higher Education and Training and the administrator of NSFAS came under fire about 5 months ago because NSFAS is paying 2.5 million rand a month for rental. And there was an undertaking to give up that contract. As much as I understand that we need venues, we can't use a venue where the payment is 2.5 million rand a month.
SANDF Admiral Prince Chabalala has confirmed that the mortal remains of the soldiers who were killed in the eastern DRC have arrived in the country. The SANDF says arrangements have been put in place for families to receive the bodies of their loved ones today. A memorial service and handover ceremony will be held at the Air Force Base Swartkop this evening, where President Cyril Ramaphosa will also attend. Chabalala says they want to afford the families of the soldiers closure.
Our fallen heroes are finally back in the country. country. They arrived last night, and today it will be an act of solemn and respectful, where we are offering a dignified send-off to say to our peacekeepers and farewell and hand over them to their families, so that we afford the families a closure and a sense of peace to know that their sons are finally back at home.
The Democratic Alliance in Gauteng is calling on the Minister for Infrastructure, Dean Macpherson, to consider including municipalities in the province in his infrastructure support program to tackle water infrastructure challenges. The party says the system status report published by Joburg Water on Tuesday showed critical reservoir levels across multiple regions in the province. The DA's Jack Bloom elaborates.
Johannesburg's water crisis has reached critical levels, with multiple reservoirs running dangerously low across the city. The Gauteng Democratic Alliance is demanding immediate intervention as thousands of residents face water outages and pressure reductions. Power failures at major rainwater pumping stations have worsened the situation, which has been deteriorating since November. The DA Gauteng proposes 3 urgent solutions: installing independent power supplies at pumping stations, upgrading aging infrastructure with smart systems, and creating a specialized rapid response unit.
Overnight rain in the Guardian Route region of the Western Cape has helped bring wildfires under control in Uniondale near George and in the Hessequa municipality. Extreme heat in the region sparked the blaze. Fire authorities say the R339 road between Uniondale and the Affontor Pass had to be closed at one point. The road is now open. The fire is now under control with a few remaining hotspots. In Hessequa, a wildfire in Hectorskral Rasisban is almost contained. Conditions over the wildfire area and overcast with a slight drizzle. Researchers say China's construction of coal-fired power plants surged last year to its highest level in almost a decade. A report by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air in Helsinki says China built more new coal plants in the first half of 2024 than any other country. Recapping the top story, members of Parliament's Employment and Labour Committee have cautioned against the use of venues for Parliament business that could put the institution in bad light. I am Ondalambana for SAFM News, headlines at 2:30.
Who says talking never solves anything? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
And that's the news for this hour. Theft, accident and 1 million rand liability cover, all covered by OUTsurance Essential. Get a quote today by simply SMSing car to 43187. 47-year-old Abner loves OUTsurance Essential because it's low-cost insurance made for older cars. For his 2006 Opel Corsa Utility 1.4, he only pays 253 rand a month. With OUTsurance Essential, accident claims are paid in cash, so you can choose the panel beater that you want to use. Top this up with the motor warranty, which covers you for mechanical and electrical breakdowns. Get saving with OUTsurance Essential for unfinanced cars that are older than 5 years and valued at less than 130,000 rand. Simply SMS car to 43187. That's car to 43187 today. Remember that OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP, and T's and C's do apply.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
The Yellow Guys have a top-class plan to play elite rugby to remain in the top 5. But second-place Giants, the Red and Blacks are undoubtedly chasing the first position. This is the top 14. Clermont-Auvergne collides with Stade Toulousain on Sunday, 16 February at 10 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Hi, I'm Zycard. Catch me every Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. on Spotlight as we bring you blow-by-blow sporting action, news. That's Spotlight every Saturday. You don't want to miss it.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
Oh, cosmic light, you shine so brightly, yet your night is darker than these eyes can see. Release your peace and bring us homeward. I can taste your freedom, though I'm never free. Oh, I taste your freedom, though I'm never free. Oh, I taste your freedom, though I'm never free. Oh, cosmic light, won't you shine so brightly? Yet your night is darker than these eyes can see. Release your peace and bring us homeward. I can taste your freedom, though I'm never free. And I am da da da, oh yeah yeah, whoa, da da da,
Tandi Ntuli coming through, Standard Bank Young Artist of the Year for Jazz a few years ago. Also part of the new School of Cool, doing her thing alongside Benjamin Jafta, DJ Ken Zero, and really just putting quite the youthful South African flair and perspective to some jazz staples. We must actually have them in studio as a collective. They're quite an interesting ensemble. It's just gone 2:15. So casting our eye out our window, in our corner of the country, it's finally decided to rain. I never mind a little bit of rain here and there. It's always good. It's good for the soul. It's good for the garden. It's good for the environment. It's good for everything. A little bit of rain here and there goes a long way. Hopefully it doesn't turn into anything worse by the time we have to leave the studio, because then that's when I have issues. When you have to drive through a Joburg storm, it's not the nicest thing to happen to you. Let's take a quick break, and then we come back on the other side and we get into a conversation around making home security evaluations a key part of your home buying checklist. We never talk about that, right? So we're going to have that conversation on the other side.
Do great solutions start with good conversation? SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Santam can cover your car in just 2 minutes. That's faster than staring into your fridge, convinced there's nothing to eat, with hopes that something new magically appears. Only to end up ordering the same meal you had yesterday. Get your car covered in just 2 minutes so you can live in the moment, not in the worry. Visit santam.co.za. Santam. This is freedom. Santam is an authorized FSP, a licensed non-life insurer and controlling company for its group companies.
Masandawana want to display their elite status with a graduation letter to the last 8. However, lower division team, Mpeni Home Defenders, are seeking to make history and join the league of giant killers. This is the Nedbank Cup Ross 16. Mamelodi Sundowns versus Mpeni Home Defenders on Sunday, 16 February at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC 1 and at 3 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Yazi Opa just sent us a message to say he's listening to the awesome show from Tabazimbi in Limpopo. I was in Tabazimbi, Opa, in November. It was hot. It was as though I was in the center of the sun myself, or the center of the earth. That is how hot it was in Tabazimbi. It was 36 degrees at its lowest. I could not understand how you guys deal there. But I'll be back because it was a beautiful part of the country. Right now, we're catching up with Damien Judge, who is a security expert at Trellador, and we're looking at when purchasing a new home, typically we focus on things like location and size and pricing and amenities and all these other things. But a very critical factor that gets overlooked is the security element by a lot of us. Not all of us, but a lot of us. And so we're having this conversation with Damien this afternoon. How are you doing today?
Afternoon, Bridget. I'm doing very, very well. And yourself?
I'm great. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's not something that's top of the mind, even though we know the circumstances that we live in South Africa, and we know that safety is a huge concern. But when we're buying a house, we almost become relaxed when looking at these elements.
No, you're right. I think, unfortunately, you read all the business books and the self-help books that tell you don't get emotional when you're buying your first house, but you always get emotional when you're buying your first house. And you do tend to overlook a few things. I remember my first house, it all looked amazing, and then suddenly the furniture's out and you realize what's happening with the skirtings at the back. And so it's all of those little things that we do get swept up in the moment, and you can have the most beautiful garden and pool and view or whatever you're looking at, the nice number of rooms, but there is those little things that then start to come home to roost later, where if we thought about it a little bit earlier, you could have probably set things up in a different way from the start.
Yeah, and I think a lot of buyers, especially in sort of our big metros, right? It's in South Africa, we pretty much live in complexes and estates and gated community for the most part in suburbia at least. And so I think a lot of people just look at the superficialness. It's like, oh, okay, I'm buying in a complex or in an estate, and they don't really sort of drill down and focus on the security vulnerabilities in said complex or estate.
You're very right. I think we do sometimes get lured into a false sense of security. There are very few places that are actually 100% safe, and you always need to take some precaution. And I think, even in some of your estates that are very remote, when you're starting to get in sort of the bush in the top northern provinces, etc., or if you're fortunate like me to live in Durban on the coast, where there's lots and lots of grey-haired monkeys that love to come and steal your food. Safety takes different forms depending on where you live, and I think just having those conversations and making sure that you've taken those into account, because often this is a big investment, perhaps the biggest investment that person is making at that time in their lives. And there could be an opportunity that you regret that through just not asking a couple of simple questions along the way.
So what are the most common security vulnerabilities that homemakers or home buyers make, and particularly new buyers? Have you observed similar trends with us and how we go about overlooking certain things?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we've noticed on our side is the lack of maintenance. So if there is security in place, you buy it. If you buy a trellis door, you generally buy it once because we make good quality. But you do need to maintain it, and you do need to keep it clean and serviced. And often, you might look at it and that first back when they're opening up the sliding door and you've arrived for the house viewing, the trellis door is nicely neat, packed away. You don't even notice that it's there. But later when you've actually had to start using it, over time, it's become a little bit harder. So I think testing those type of things, similar to like your electrical fittings. You want to make sure that everything's working as you expect when you're buying something new. So I think that's general maintenance, and also just the environment around the home. Like I didn't know there wasn't a neighborhood watch, or I didn't know that there was an issue with monkeys, as an example, for us here in Durban. So I think, Skulk Poseidon, the comedian, he actually did a skit because he moved to Durban, and he spoke exactly about that. No one told me about these monkeys type of thing. So I think it's real. I think we do need to ask those questions, but really from our side, it's about the maintenance and making sure that those products have been cared for over time. And also housing or residential population dynamics have changed dramatically in urban areas, as people look for jobs. So we've become very dense and very populated in the main cities. And security needs could have changed depending on where that house was first built. And it's one owner and they're moving out now, so they've never really had a problem. So they haven't really done much, and you just assume that will continue. So it's important, and I think that the key is that you're not going. There's so many things to think about over that period, and you're going to need some fresh eyes and clean thinking when you're assessing all of these things. Yeah,
I chuckle when you make reference to the monkeys, because born and bred in Durban, grew up in Westville, so I'm very, very familiar with the monkeys. I've waged a few wars. And in fact, in our childhood home, we had every kind of trailer door and burglar guard you can think of. And I think it was primarily not for the actual human burglars, but for the monkeys to not make their way in. Let's talk about the essential security features as well that perhaps buyers should be looking out for in a home, and what kinds of upgrades provide for a better return on investment, because that's always the other part of the conversation, right? People go, well, I don't want to kit my house out with like all, the security features, the bars, the pull doors, the cameras, the motion sensors, and spend tens of thousands of rands putting all this stuff in, only for me to not be able to get my return on investment should I sell the home in a couple of years.
Yeah, you're spot on. And just by the way, the battle continues in Westville, so it's still going on. But in terms of return on investment, you're right. So I think what's been amazing from us as a brand is we've also evolved into a more aesthetically pleasing security option. So it's not just about your retractable security. We've got products that will offer, climate control, so close out the window, close out the sun, but also that barrier, like your aluminum louver shutters. So there's so many options if you want to add value to your home from an aesthetics perspective. And I think we've seen it a few times in our engagements with estate agents. When you've got genuine Trelly doors installed that are being well looked after in a suburb, there is a premium there is value add in that sale from a home perspective. So there's lots of options. It doesn't have to be. There's only one solution that'll work, like the bars that people have become accustomed to. There's many things that we can do, and they do add value and aesthetics to the home.
Yeah. For sort of looking at technology and innovation, right? We're seeing a lot of home security technologies now and all kinds of trends here. What should home buyers be considering when it comes to that? Because, I'm old school. I don't know. These technologically advanced homes, I wouldn't know if I'm getting value or no value.
Yeah, I think from a security side, we've always promoted layers of security. There's elements of the security, specifically in the technology space, that is about early warnings and notifying response to come and help. Mm-hmm. So that's your beams, that's your alarm systems, those type of things, and they're crucial in this whole sort of ecosystem of securing your castle. The barrier side is the last line, sort of, that needs to buy you as much time as possible for that support to come. So we always look at it a holistic view. If you've got a Trelidor sales consultant to come out and have a look at your home, we'd start at the fence on the outside and work our way in to really assess where your security needs are. And only at the end of that, we might turn around and say, you're actually from a barrier side, you're fine. But we would recommend moving your beams off your wall of your house, for example, and closer to the perimeter fence, so that alarm goes off that much earlier and gives more options for response. So it's a holistic view. Technology is incredible. It's always moving. But as we've also seen with when we have some load shedding, Trelidor products are load shedding proof.
All right. And I just want to, the other thing that when we were chatting with my team is oftentimes when we go see properties, I'm not looking, when I'm looking at the yard, I'm looking at the swimming pool and the fully grown trees and the lush lawn and how my dog can run around. I'm really not trying to look for things like blind spots and weaknesses in the parameter, but these are things that are essential that people should be considering.
Bridget, agreed, and I think it's not. I'm not going to say it's sad that we have to do that. I think in every place there's always going to be some element of safety that you need to consider, and it isn't the first thing on your mind when you're moving into that home, or picturing the dog chasing the ball around with the kids. But it is something that our team is trained for. So that's why engaging with. It's all about second opinions. I mean, I remember when I moved into my second home, I had an electrician friend. The first thing I did was bring him around to double check everything for me because I didn't know what to look for.
Yeah.
And I think that's often the trick in everything that we do is accept that you have your limitations and ask for help, because help is there, it's available, and you can make a much better educated decision up front, and it doesn't have to cost you anything down the line.
Awesome. Damien Judge, thank you so much for the time today, and he's a security expert. It is approaching 2:30. We're going to bring you the headline news, and then we're going to come back with Kids Corner on the other side. And then, of course, because it is World Radio Day today, we got to catch up with some young broadcasters coming out of VOW, which is Voice of Wits, formerly known as Voice of Wits, now known as VOW 881. Well, they'll tell me exactly how they stage code, actually, if it's VOW 881 or VOW 881 or VOW 8.81. These are important things in the world of broadcast. 2:30 on The Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga.
Thank you, Bridget. In the news headlines, members of Parliament's Employment and Labour Committee have cautioned against the use of venues for Parliament business that could put the institution in a bad light. Overnight rain in the Garden Route region of the Western Cape has helped bring wildfires under control in Uniondale near George and in the Hessequa municipality. And mediated talks in Cairo aimed at rescuing the floundering Gaza ceasefire deal have reportedly made a breakthrough. A full update for those at the top of the hour.
You're listening to Bridget Masinga on SAFM. This program is brought to you by SABC Education, enriching minds, enriching lives.
Side by side.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Side by Side, where we celebrate you, the most important person in your child's life, and support you with helpful advice and information to make parenting just a little easier. Brought to you by the National Department of Health, Ilifa Labantwana, and the SABC Education. Together, we're here to help you give your baby the best possible start in life. Today, we're talking about the nutritional needs of children aged 6 to 12 months. This is such an exciting and important stage of your baby's life, a time of rapid growth and discovery. On our drama episode yesterday, we heard from Joyce, who shared valuable insights about balanced nutrition during this critical period. She reminded us how the right foods can help little ones grow strong, healthy, and ready to explore the world. Now we're taking the conversation further. Joining us today is Teresa, a dietitian from the Department of Health in Gqeberha, who will guide us through more practical tips and answer some of the biggest questions parents often have about feeding their growing babies. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us today. What are the key nutritional needs for children aged 6 to 12 months?
Thank you for having me today. It's really great to be able to talk to you all. If we have a look at young children, we want to make sure that they're getting enough nutritious food every day to grow healthy, strong, and smart. Around 6 months old, your baby is growing quickly and needs more energy and nutrients than at any other time in their life. So from 6 months, breast milk is still your baby's main source of energy and nutrients, but solid foods should need to be added around now. You may be wondering how much food to give your baby then. It's important to note that your baby's only got a small stomach and needs small amounts of soft, nutritious food throughout the day, which then increases as they get older. So then what type of food do we need to give our babies? In addition to grains and starchy foods, we want to feed your baby a variety of other foods, especially animal proteins like dairy, eggs, meat, fish, chicken, those sort of things, because proteins are our body building foods. We also want to give baby fruits and vegetables every day, not only starchy cereals and porridge. Be sure to give your baby her first foods after she's breastfed though, or between breastfeeding sessions, so that your baby continues to breastfeed as much as possible. Remember, the breast milk is still the most important thing at this age. When you start to feed your baby solid food, take extra care that baby doesn't become sick though. As our babies learn to crawl about and explore, germs can spread from their hands to their mouths. So we want to protect your baby from getting sick by washing your hands and baby's hands with soap before preparing food and before every meal. The Road to Health booklet or their clinic book has more information on how much to feed your baby at different ages as they're growing.
So what are the best first foods for a baby?
When your baby is 6 months old, baby is just learning how to chew. Even if she doesn't have teeth, those hard gums can also chew. So her first foods need to be soft so that they're easy to swallow. These can be foods like porridge, well mashed fruits and vegetables, or mashed or blended protein building foods. Did you know that when porridge or other food is too watery, it doesn't have as many nutrients, and it also becomes a choking risk? So to make it more nutritious and safe, cook it until it's thick enough not to run off the spoon. We also want to feed baby when you see baby's hunger cues or signs that baby's hungry. Babies show us that they're hungry by putting their hands or toys or blankets into their mouths, or sometimes they open their mouths very widely. Or if they're very hungry, they might even start to cry. So after washing your hands, start by giving your baby just 2 or 3 spoonfuls of some soft food, maybe twice a day or so. At this age, baby's stomach is still small, as we said, so we can only eat a small amount at each meal. The number of meals can then slowly increase as your baby's eating 3 meals and 2 snacks, etc., as they're growing older between the ages of 9 months and a year. If your baby spits out the food, please don't stress. The taste of a new food may surprise your baby. Also remember, baby is only used to drinking milk. So now baby needs to learn to chew and move the food around with their tongue. So give baby time to get used to these new foods and flavors. And be patient and don't force to feed your baby. We rather want to look for signs that baby is full. And then we want to stop feeding when baby is showing those signs. We never force feed. As your baby grows, their stomach will also grow, and then they'll slowly but surely start to eat more food with each meal.
So, as your baby gets older, should you gradually increase the amount of food you offer?
Yeah, so as we've just mentioned, we do want to increase that food with age as your baby grows and their stomach is growing. But it's very important to pay attention to your baby's hunger cues and then to feed them on demand. So from 6 to 8 months, we normally feed our baby about half a cup of soft food 2 or 3 times a day. Your baby can eat anything, even the same food you are eating, except for honey, which we don't start until a baby is a year old, as it can be dangerous. You can start to add a healthy snack, maybe something like mashed fruit, between meals as they're showing you that they're hungrier between their meals. As your baby gets increasing amounts of solid food, we still want to continue giving the same amount of breast milk. The milk is still the most important. Then from about 9 to 11 months, your baby can start taking half a cup of food 3 to 4 times a day. So now we're increasing that number that they can eat. And then we can also add a healthy snack. Now you can start to chop up the food into soft, small, bite-sized pieces instead of mashing it. So we're slowly but surely increasing the texture as well. Your baby might even start to feed herself with her fingers, which is great. And then, of course, we continue to breastfeed whenever the baby is hungry. Each meal needs to be both easy for you and your baby to eat, and it needs to be packed with nutrition because every bite counts. So food needs to be rich in energy and nutrients. We mentioned earlier that baby mustn't only get starchy foods like porridge and potatoes. We also want to give things like vegetables, fruits, beans, split peas, and a little bit of energy-rich oil or fat. And then, of course, our very important animal proteins like dairy, eggs, meat, fish, chicken, those sort of things every day. Eating a variety of food gives your baby the best chance of getting all of the different nutrients that they need to grow well. Again, if your baby refuses one of these foods or a new food, or they spit it out, please don't force it. Try it again a few days later. You can also try mixing it with another food that your baby likes, or adding a little bit of breast milk onto it if necessary.
Teresa, thank you so much for joining us today. In closing, how should we approach feeding babies who are not breastfed?
So if you're not breastfeeding your baby might need to eat more often, but otherwise it's the same as a breastfed baby. So as with our breastfed babies, you're going to start giving your baby solid foods at 6 months, beginning with 2 or 3 spoonfuls of soft mashed foods, 3 or 4 times a day, and then we're going to give her half a cup of soft food 4 times a day from 6 to 8 months old, adding an extra snack. From 9 to 11 months old, she'll need half a cup of food 4 to 5 times a day, plus 2 healthy snacks. So it's just slightly more than a breastfed child. But that's feeding a child in a nutshell. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share this information with you all today.
And thank you for listening to Side by Side, the show that supports you to give your child the best possible start in life. Brought to you by the National Department of Health, Ilifa Labantwana, and the SABC Education. Join the conversation with other caregivers on our Facebook page at Side by Side SA, and look out for more great content. Join us again, same time next week, when we'll be talking about what to do when your baby is sick with diarrhea.
This program was brought to you by SABC Education. Enriching minds, enriching lives.
Specsavers now looks after your hearing as well as your vision with Specsavers Audiology. With 60 stores and counting, we are South Africa's largest audiology group. For a limited time only, buy one rechargeable hearing aid and get 50% off the second. You heard right. Buy one rechargeable hearing aid and get 50% off the second. Find your nearest store at specsavers.co.za. Specsavers Audiology. Test your hearing and join the conversation. T's and C's apply.
The Northwest Legislature Portfolio Committee on Community Safety and Transport Management, chaired by Honorable Freddy Sonakile, will host public hearings on Marine Oil Pollution Bill on the 14th February 2025 at Groot Mariko Community Hall in Ngakamudiri Molema District, Mogopa Community Hall near Venterstop in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District, Utlanang Community Hall at Christiana in Dr. Ruth Somuti Mompati, and Sutelong Community Hall in Bojanala District. All public hearings start at 10.
The whispers in the morning as I look in your
This February, the month of love and self-care, at SAFM we're celebrating with you, spreading love to all. Let's embrace kindness, connection, and self-care. And as always, SAFM will continue leading the conversations that move us through love, wellness, and everything in between. This month, let's love ourselves, love each other, and keep the conversation going. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
'Cause I'm your lady and you are my man.
You're listening to Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
All right, it's just gone 22 at 3 o'clock on the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga, as we mark World Radio Day today, as proclaimed in 2011 by UNESCO. And this is a day really that celebrates the power and the impact of radio, but also we've seen, some of the technological innovation and advancement within the space, and we've seen how radio has evolved with the times as a medium to incorporate now visual elements as well and new forms of multimedia communication. It's been a wonderful, wonderful platform for those of us who've been a part of it now for the last 2 decades. It's been a whirlwind journey that has taken us from commercial youth radio all the way through to circular music radio, all the way through to full circle moments on talk radio. And it's just really the beginning for most radio practitioners. Once upon a time, the great David O'Sullivan, who I had the honor of working with alongside for at least 5 years, he hosted the breakfast show, and I did the lunchtime show. And David O'Sullivan once said, radio is a revolving door. Nobody ever leaves radio. We just keep going around and around and discovering new things. And we've got 2 young radio broadcasters joining us now from what was formerly known as VOW, the voice of Wits, now known as VOW 881. Daniel Ntembu, a.k.a. Maldi Opulence. I want to get to the bottom of that name. And Nompumelelo Ncube joining us. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic. How are you? I really did not think you people would actually use Daniel.
It is Daniel Mtembu.
And I genuinely thought it would be Mel D and not Daniel.
Listen, I've got seniority here. So I was like, firstly, we're going to go with your government name that your parents named you by. And then we're going to use your radio moniker, which is what you're professionally known as, Maldi Opulence. How did you get to that, by the way?
All right, so a quick story is that it was a talent search at school. I needed a stage name. I didn't have one. I thought I needed it at the time, but I think it has worked out in favor because right now I'm using it. But essentially what happened was I wanted something that resonates with me, so I then took my surname, which is Mahlebewana, and obviously I was not going to say that name, Mahlebewana Daniel, each time. So I took the first 4 letters, which is M-A-H-L, and then I just slapped in the D at the end, and there we go, Mel D.
I mean, fabulous and entertaining story. Nompumelelo, you decided to be the wiser of the two because you were like, I want longevity in this career and I want my name to just stand with me for life. So you decided not to get a stage name at any point.
Me?
Yeah. Yes, you.
I think I love
Yes,
my name
you.
and my surname. That's my brand. And I recently got married. And I'm like, I'm not going to change my surname even though I'm married. That's my brand. I am Nompumelelo Mncube. I want people to remember me as Nompumelelo Mncube, and it ends there.
You see, and that is the difference between young ladies and young gents, perhaps. But let's get into your guys' radio journey. Currently, you guys are the lunchtime duo there at Vow 881. Talk to me about your love for radio for each one of you. How did that sort of come about, and when did you know that you had a love for radio and the radio bug had bitten?
All right, so for me, I'll go first. I never really thought this was what I'd possibly ever want to do, possibly for the rest of my life as well, I grew up as a very shy kid, very young, very frail, didn't have friends, always socially awkward, but I got to high school. I somewhat blossomed into the most beautiful butterfly. And thereafter, it was matric year, and I had to decide what is it that I wanted to do with my life. Where am I going to go study? I thought architecture was it, but I was like, nah, I don't think it's the one for me. I went to a sound engineering school with the intent of actually doing radio presenting and got there. Didn't really work out. I'm still in school right now, just completed my degree, but that's essentially how I got into it. Just the love for communicating with people and just being a storyteller and hearing so many stories of us people of South Africa, because we've got such a myriad of history and stories to share. So always listening to people closely and also making them feel super, super special. That I think is the reason why I got into it.
Nompumelelo, for you?
Well, my story is quite tricky, right? I've always known growing up that I've always wanted to be in the media space, but not really knowing what I wanted to do, right? And then I fell in love with acting from primary school to high school. And I was like, you know what? I am going to focus on acting after school. And then after school, I took a gap year just to find my foot in the acting space, right? As I was done with that, trying to find myself inside the acting space, then I decided to go study journalism because I've always wanted to study either journalism or law, right? And I found myself falling in love with journalism. I started journalism, and then I took a break. I went back to focus on my acting, and then after focusing on my acting, I was like, you know what? I do have a qualification in this. Let me just go try it and see where exactly do I fit.
Well, listen, I love it because I think at the bottom of it all is the love for communication and the love for sort of touching people's lives and using a creative medium to do that. And you guys, I was listening, by the way, I was listening to some of your show before we came in, on this sort of cross broadcast. So these two host that lunch show on Vow 881. You are live on SAFM now, which is a talk radio station. So I don't know if you guys want to table something on the agenda for the next 5 minutes that we can discourse on.
Of course. I mean, we've also got the amazing Catherine Grenfell joining us today for a full show broadcast. So it's quite an amazing one. It's been an amazing one as well, just really being in the space of a veteran. But I mean, the sort of question that I have for you, Bridget, maybe if you can just shed light on that, is that we do know that SAFM is known for its contemporary hits, and VOW often focuses on rich cultural sounds. What do you think each station can learn from each other when it comes to pushing musical boundaries in South Africa particularly?
Well, listen, as the oldest station in the SABC bouquet and the largest talk station in the country, I think, for us, it's really about not just, profiling and pushing boundaries within the musical space, but it's also about discoursing and engaging in conversations that really drive the nation at that particular point in time. And I think those conversations oftentimes, at least on this show and many other shows on the station, oftentimes include young people. There's this sort of misconception that, for instance, what you guys do at Vow 881 is completely different from what we do on an adult contemporary talk station. But essentially, at the end of the day, we all participating, contributing citizens of the country that want similar things, right? And so I think there's a lot of synergies. There's a lot of learning and unlearning from the two generations or the multiple layers of generations. There's a lot of cross-pollination as well, from a music perspective, from a content perspective, from just topics and discourse that currently affect you on campus, that affect us in our day-to-day lives, that affect our households. So the learning never really stops, and we never really separated from each other. You fast forward in 30 years or 20 years' time, you might find yourself exactly here, playing less music, but still very much in touch with what's happening on the circular side, still very much in touch with what's happening with creativity and evolution on the continental side, but wanting to have deeper connections and deeper conversations. So there's always learning, and that's why someone like myself sits on this particular show to sort of bring those two generations together and bring all of those worlds together, and the learning never stops. I was thoroughly entertained. So from a music perspective, I play very little music, but I curate one or two songs on the show, and we are very deliberate about the curation of the music that complements the content conversation of the show. And I love me some Pan-African, Afrocentric music. I love me some global sounds, and so we bring that along on the show quite a bit. And from time to time, we also like to reminisce about those nostalgic sounds of 10-15 years ago when we were all in the club scene. We like to pretend that we're in the car with our younger brothers and sisters, picking them up from varsity and introducing them to some retro Janet Jackson. And I laughed because you played retro Beyonce 5 minutes ago. And I said to my team, I haven't heard that song in such a long time. And I was grooving with you guys. It was such a pleasure to hear. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other on a multitude of things. Oh, have we lost them? No, we have not. Mel D. Opulence, are you still there? Oh, I think we could have lost the kids. Technology is not in our favor today. It really is not. We were, in conversation with the two hosts of that lunch show, which is the lunchtime show. It's broadcast between 12 and 3 o'clock on Vow 881, formerly known as Vow, the voice of Wits FM. And we were in conversation with Mel D. Opulence and Nompumelelo Mncube, who are the two co-hosts of that particular show. But listen, technology has a way of getting in the way of things today, because we also use different systems. Generally, when we do sort of these cross broadcasts on World Radio Day, it's easier with last year we did it with Radio 2000 downstairs, and I went to go visit David, and we had a wonderful cross broadcast between the two stations because we use the same system. And of course, at times when we just get up and go to a different radio station, a different generational radio station, and go invade their space. But today it was impossible, and so we had to use technology to patch us into each other, and sometimes technology fails. But also looking at the time and coming from circular music, I know that they had to get into that last song so that they can get into their top of the hour, and I'm presuming that their structure probably has some news as well at the top of the hour that pertains to issues that affect them on campus and as students. So we would have been wrapping wrapping up our conversation nonetheless. I hope you really do still stay connected to the wonderful medium that is radio. The question oftentimes, the cheeky question oftentimes on this day every single year is, has podcast killed radio? And really it has not. There's space for both of us to coexist. There's incredible podcast content that's being put out there, and podcasters that are driving really great conversations, people that are really providing a space to ventilate and unhash issues in a way that radio can't, and the two can really sit together side by side in a very complementary way. Radio goes nowhere. We still stay here, as you can hear from the young ones who've just 2 years into radio, and this is the medium that they've chosen. No doubt they'll still be here 20 years on, pushing innovation and pushing boundaries and reimagining what radio can be and the kind of impact that it can have. It's almost time for us to make way for Ashraf. He's coming through with his team. I'm sure he's also, by the way, do you guys follow Ashraf on social media? Ashraf is one of the most interactive people on social media. You definitely want to follow him. He even has TikTok. So you definitely want to follow him. And we're shooting some content for World Radio Day yesterday that I'm sure by now he's uploaded, so you don't want to miss that. Go on over to his handles and comment on that. He's been around the block once or twice, maybe 3 times as well. I'm sure he's got some radio reflections and stories to share with you about his journey behind the mic. I mean, for myself, I always take this opportunity every single year on Radio Day just to thank you for your loyalty in journeying with me, for your loyalties and growing with me. Every station, every platform that I've been a part of has been a learning curve. It's been an opportunity to expand my thinking, to expand my mind, to grow and stretch myself as a broadcaster, and to stretch myself and open myself to new ideas and concepts as a person. And I don't take any conversation lightly. We may not always get it correct, and we may not always give ourselves a 10 out of 10, but we always strive to bring you the very best by way of radio content that we possibly can, no matter which microphone we hold and which seat we sit under. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to do this for 20 years. Not everybody gets to be able to do it for 20 years, and it's been incredible. I've worked with some of the best commercial brands out there, and I've been under the guidance of some of the greatest radio minds out there. And I got to give a shout out to Neil Johnson, who is a radio god. We often say Neil is a radio dinosaur. He has been at the helm of shaping radio minds across every radio station, and he continues to do so until today. So Neil Johnson on World Radio Day, if you are listening today, I thank you so very much for the impact that you've had in my radio career and that you continue to have on so many other people's radio careers. We'll see you tomorrow. Have an incredible day further. Inshallah, God willing, we get to do it again.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission